Guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, guys, I'm going to be doing an updated MCU tier list. I'm going to try to spread these out a little bit more since I know it's a little early. It hasn't even been over a year yet. But it is the end. Wakanda Forever does end the end of Phase 4. And so I wanted to kind of start this tradition now, in a routine basis. So at the end of Phase 5 is when I will probably do another updated MCU tier list like this. But it's been almost a year, so my opinions have changed a little bit on some of these movies, obviously. I don't think I've rewatched any of these MCU films, however, but I've certainly watched a lot of MCU content, seen public opinion about it, seen how, what people like and dislike about the films, and it's definitely shaped how I like the movies over the past year from just consuming all this MCU content over the past year, because we've been getting so much MCU content in Phase 4, especially when they throw in the shows in the mix. It's just so much. And obviously, that's a whole nother issue. But, yeah, I wanted to do this updated MCU tier list for fun, to kind of, wrap things up for the ending of the year. I'm also going to be doing a 2022 movies I saw tier list, which I am very, very excited to do. There were a lot, in that case, there were a lot of movies that I missed for doing movie reviews on, especially ones at the beginning of the year. I watched a ton of movies at the beginning of the year, and I definitely want to give you guys my feedback on them and how I felt about those movies. So, I'm really excited to do that towards the ending of the year, probably after Avatar releases. That's like my last movie that I have planned in the year. There's one other movie that I'm going to be watching too, alongside of that's coming out, here pretty soon, towards the end of the year. So, there's going to be a few more, and then I'm going to be able to do that before 2023 comes along. So yeah, really excited to do that. We got some Walking Dead content coming up as well. I watched the series finale a couple of days ago, and I'm going to be doing a seasons ranking for the Walking Dead. I don't know if I'm going to be doing any other Walking Dead videos either, but I'm sure I can come up with something if you guys really like that seasons ranking. I will probably pop out another video as well before The Walking Dead starts doing its spin-off shows, which I'm actually pretty excited for. If you guys watched the reaction, you would have saw how I felt about the ending. So I know that was quite a long intro, but let's just get into this tier list. So the 5 tiers we have, I changed it up a little bit because I thought it was a little redundant last time, the name of the tiers that I had, but we have Awesome in the top tier. This is like peak MCU, really, just most of them very rewatchable, absolute blockbusters, and yeah, just the best of the best when it comes to MCU content. And then we have Great, which is above average MCU films that don't quite make that Awesome tier, but can still be quite rewatchable and are still very great MCU movies. Then we got the good/average tier. This is an MCU movie that just did its job, filled in its spot, and it was just, it was competent. It did its job. Nothing more to say. And then we have the mediocre tier, which even, I'd say for the MCU movies, mediocre is still a pretty decent movie for most of them, but in terms of MCU standards, a little underwhelming, maybe slightly below average. Just didn't meet all of its expectations that we'd like to see out of an MCU movie. And then meh, there's the meh tier, because I don't think there's any MCU movie that is just downright bad, just terrible movie in general. But for an MCU movie, it's not rewatchable. It was very underwhelming, just not a very good MCU movie. As a movie itself, it's still probably decent. So that just goes to show you how high of a standard we have for MCU movies. Yeah, getting on to this list, we now have, I think, 30 MCU movies to do, which is just crazy. I'm not including the shows, by the way. I think it's weird to include the shows, just because, there's a big difference between a show and a movie in terms of stories and characters and things like that. And also, I haven't watched any of the MCU shows. I don't think they have really done that much to add to the MCU as a whole, in my opinion. And the only MCU film that was really heavily carried by the show, you kind of had to watch the show to, like, fully understand anything, which even I didn't watch WandaVision. I still got a kick out of this movie, was Multiverse of Madness. So, um, yeah, I don't want to, not to hate on the shows or anything like that. I think some of them have their place, but I'm not going to be including them on this tier list. So, starting out with the first movie of the MCU, going all the way back to Iron Man, which I think is an absolute awesome MCU movie. Definitely goes in the top tier. A great way to start off with the MCU. And, before MCU kind of finally came to the end of its Infinity Saga, a couple movies before Infinity War, I'm sure a lot of people were probably thinking, why did we decide to start with Iron Man? Why him in particular? Because I know when I was a little kid, and I was, watching the MCU movies, I thought, Iron Man, yeah, he's a great superhero, but he doesn't seem like he's exactly the leader of the MCU. He doesn't feel like he is, he's kind of the main focus of the MCU. But then when you go back to this movie and then you just see his evolution throughout the Infinity Saga up until Endgame, you see how important of a role he played, and why they ultimately chose him to be the one who was, the main focus, the one who would kind of drive everything. Because you look back on this movie, and it really did change a lot of things. It really did cause certain things to happen and fall in place, and it just shows you how much of an impact Iron Man has. He might seem like this selfish, arrogant character, which, in the first Iron Man movie, he was still growing, he was still like that. But he eventually, you find out that he's not just this selfish character that, many people just could really care less about. He actually does play a very important role. And so you go back to this movie and you really see how much he has evolved since the beginning. You start out this movie and he's just this rich guy who's, just looking to get lucky, is, just does not, does not view other people as really important. He's very, cocky, selfish, whatever. And then his wake-up moment is when he gets kidnapped by that group of terrorists who are after his weapons, and he's got to figure out a way to get himself out of this situation, or else he knows that he's screwed. And so he does, and that was kind of his wake-up call, like, hey, I need to be doing something, and I can't just be pretending like I'm on this podium because people are starting to catch up to me. And I think that's the really great thing about this first Iron Man movie. A lot of people talk about a lot of other stuff, but what I like to focus on when it comes to the greatness of the first Iron Man film is that you can see where we started from, and it was something so small. Like, in terms of MCU standards now, from what we've seen, a guy who is, this genius inventor and is kind of ahead of his time and everything like that, inventing these very powerful military weapons, and then these terrorists want to acquire these weapons and use it for bad. That's pretty small scale compared to what we've seen in the MCU. But this movie manages to still make it very interesting, because it's not all just about the terrorists and everything like that. That's still very cool aspect, and you see how he's got to kind of catch up to the terrorists in the movies by inventing all these suits and taking them out. But you also have his partner the whole time alongside of him, kind of jealous of him and trying to create this suit of his own. And by the ending of the movie, you see he's Iron Man won because he had that little bit of an edge. He was always ahead of his opponents by just a little bit. You watch that final battle scene between Ironmonger and Iron Man in his Mark III suit, and, he fixed the icing problem, he fixed some of the issues that he had with his past few suits, and just had that little bit of an edge to be able to beat Ironmonger, which was a very interesting villain in this movie. And so, yeah, I really got a kick out of this movie. It's a little inconsistent because, obviously you don't have the War Machine that we're used to. But I think War Machine was meant to be put aside in this movie and waited to, be put into the spotlight in Iron Man 2. So it's not really much of a setback for me at all. But yeah, just a really great kickoff to the MCU, a really great origin story, and is just it's just a great way to represent the birthplace of the MCU is this first Iron Man film. Next up, we got the Incredible Hulk, which I believe last year I put this in the meh tier. I'm gonna be a little bit more generous and put it in the mediocre tier. There's a lot of people over the past few years who have warmed up to this film a little bit and appreciated it for its individuality. As an MCU movie, of course, it is a black sheep. It does not belong in the MCU at all. But if you look at it on an individual level, Edward Norton and his portrayal of Hulk is really good. It's certainly better than what they did with Mark Ruffalo. I think they had a really good start with Hulk, and a really good replacement for Edward Norton. I mean, I think Mark Ruffalo's Hulk in the first Avengers movie, I think that was the best Hulk we've ever gotten. But then just slow decline until we got to Endgame and we got Professor Hulk. That was so atrocious. And so I think this is a really good Hulk, probably one of the more scarier ones. And a nice, battle sequence at the end. Pretty small scale, but Abomination and Hulk, really cool to see them duke it out. And obviously they reintroduced Abomination into She-Hulk, which I don't think was very necessary. I know they're trying to make this movie, not seem as much of a black sheep by kind of bringing back some of the things that it did. But I don't think it was very necessary. Just unfortunate that this movie is in the spot that it is, because Edward Norton decided not to continue with it, or there was some kind of conflict. I forgot exactly what it was. So yeah, it's just very, very unfortunate because, you look back at the MCU now and you see that Hulk was the second movie that came out in the MCU, and it really did not do much because they just ended up replacing him in the first Avengers movie anyway. So really the only significance that this movie has on the MCU is its final end credit scene that just further hints at the Avengers movie being released. So it's unfortunate the position it is, but on an individual superhero movie level, I think it's decent. But going off of MCU standards, I would never really rewatch this movie just because of how out of place it feels. And so it goes at the mediocre tier for that reason. Next up, we got Iron Man 2, which I think is a highly, highly criticized MCU film for absolutely no reason. I think this is a great MCU movie. I'm a big fan of all the Iron Man films, as you will see when I talk about Iron Man 3 as well. But I fully defend Iron Man 2. I think it is still a really great Iron Man movie, still continues the arc nice and smoothly. And I think it gets too much criticism, Iron Man 2 and 3, for the exact same reasons, which is what they did with the villain. They say that Whiplash is a bit underwhelming, which I disagree with. I think this movie was supposed to have kind of two villains. You had Justin Hammer, who's kind of the jealous guy who really is just not smart enough to invent things that Stark can, so he has to use Whiplash, which is... he's definitely above average in terms of his IQ, and he can create these really nice suits. So he has him do all the work for him and create all this chaos. And so I think that's actually a really interesting dynamic. Having Justin Hammer, the jealous doofus, causing all this chaos with this guy who really should have just been put in jail and that would have been over. But because Justin Hammer was jealous of him, he allowed Whiplash to, get out of jail and help him out with, basically going above Stark. So again, we have another competition where Stark has to compete with these people, because if he doesn't, they're going to get ahead of him and probably use those suits for bad, which he does not want. So I think, again, it's kind of the same story as the first Iron Man, just in a different way, and I really dig it, because you get a few more extra elements in here. They introduce Black Widow. We get, not finally, I guess. We get a very nice War Machine performance in this movie. Some people were saying that this movie was just purely to set up the first Avengers movie, which I don't really get what they're saying. The only other Avengers character that they introduced was Black Widow. So, sure, they could have made a Black Widow movie before the first Avengers movie. But I think her spot in this movie, she played a decent role. She didn't necessarily need the most major role so that we could get a really good origin story of her. I think they really could have placed her origin story any time before Avengers Endgame, and they would have been in an okay spot. But obviously they didn't do that. So I'll talk about that later. But Iron Man 2, I really, really dig it. I think the final battle sequence is really great. There are also some just other small battle sequences sprinkled throughout the movie that are really great, especially that race car battle sequence. You got the suitcase armor, has a backup. Tony, holds his own a little bit without the suit for a while, and then finally gets the suitcase armor, takes out Whiplash's first prototype model. And then we obviously get Rhodey and Stark fighting each other as well. Rhodey's not happy with Stark. He knows that he is just kind of drinking his problems away because he knows that he's dying, and so Rhodey's trying to kind of give him a wake up call, like, hey, dude, there are people who are trying to steal your ideas, and you are actively dying and not doing anything about it right now. You need to wake up. And so War Machine kind of just assumes the role if Stark is not going to do anything, and goes off and has the military help him build this War Machine suit, which makes for a really great final battle sequence when they go up against Whiplash and all of his basically android type robot things. And it's just a really, really badass final battle sequence. Both of the Iron Mans are fighting against them. I think it's really, really cool in that dome. And so yeah, I've always liked War Machine. I've always liked Iron Man, and so I think it was really cool to see them be a duo in this movie. And fortunately, we never got that again. But maybe we'll see more of War Machine in the future, hopefully. But yeah, I really dig Iron Man 2. I think it gets a lot too much criticism, and it's really, really enjoyable. So I put it in the great tier. Next up, we have Thor. I'm going to put Thor in the good/average tier. I know some people might be generous and put it in the great tier. I'm going to put it in the good/average tier. I think it does its job at introducing Thor, and showing us kind of the tone of Asgard and all the characters involved with it, with its Shakespearean-like tone. They really do it well with the dialogue in this movie, with Onin and Heimdall and all the other characters involved in Asgard. And so it does its job, and it really does. It just does its job with introducing Thor to Earth in this movie, and seeing his struggles, and seeing that, like, hey, you may be a god in Asgard, but when you come down to Earth, he kind of gets a reality check, like, hey, I'm not this person above all, like, on Earth I'm really just a stupid guy. Everybody views me as just a stupid dude who doesn't know what's going on, and it makes for some really funny moments. But it also just adds to the character development really well, where Thor on Asgard, he's definitely still kind of learning. He's been around for hundreds of years, but he has to realize that you may be worthy, but if you get too arrogant and selfish, look what happens with that. And so he kind of has to redeem himself a little bit and realize, like, hey, I'm not better than everybody else. Yeah, I really like that focus on that. I like Heimdall's performance here. I like Loki's performance, Onin's performance. Everybody did a really good job. Jane, just everybody did a really good job in this movie. And eventually they would all kind of spread out. All these characters, Asgard, would kind of spread out and go into their own direction. I mean, there is a completely different story arc with Loki compared to Thor. And then Onin kind of goes off, and then Heimdall is kind of sprinkled throughout the MCU here and there, and then Jane. It kind of seemed like they didn't really know what to do with her after after Thor: The Dark World, and so they just brought her back into Thor: Love and Thunder for some reason, which I'll talk about when we get to that. So a little bit weird, but overall, I really like all the characters introduced into Thor. I like the tone. The humor is really good. I think this is where they started to learn their humor a little bit more. And yeah, I really dug Thor, so I'm going to put it in the good/average tier. Not going to be too generous and put it in the great tier, because I'm not that huge of a fan of it, but it does its job. Next up, we got Captain America, the First Avenger, which I'm going to be putting, again, in the good/average tier above Thor. Not too huge of a fan of some of these OG MCU characters' origin stories as I am with Iron Man. But again, just like with Thor, it does its job. I know, some people might be saying, like, what are you doing? Why are you putting in the good slash average show? These are the introductions to our main superheroes going throughout the MCU. I know, but I'm really not that huge of a fan of some of these Phase 1 origin story movies. I liked Phase 1. I liked the tone of it. I liked how it wasn't super formulaic, unlike a lot of the other MCU films, but for the most part, a lot of the MCU films in Phase 1 really were just there to do their job, to introduce the characters and get us ready for Avengers, which was kind of going to be the, how do you want to say it, the climax of the MCU. Like, yeah, now things are really getting started. So, Captain America the First Avenger, like I said, it does its job, and it does its job. I don't really know how to explain it. I like the character of Captain America. I'm not a huge fan of him just because, he got his powers through a serum, obviously. But they show us that what matters is in the heart of the superhero, not the physicality. So really, what drives and motivates Captain America more than anything is his heroic mentality that is just in him. And so he is the perfect guy to get the superhero serum, and we've seen many other people have used it for bad, but because of his heroic motivation for being in the military, he does use it for good. I've heard a lot of people criticize Red Skull. I think he does a decent job. I don't really have any particular criticisms, but I'm not really sure what it is exactly that people have to criticize about Red Skull in this movie. So I like the first half of this movie, but when we actually start to get into the World War II stuff, where he's fighting against the Nazis and then eventually has to fight against Red Skull, that's where I don't know, it kind of just goes downhill a little bit for me. I really like the first half where we're just getting introduced to Captain America a lot more for some reason. I don't know why, but Captain America the First Avenger, it goes in the good slash average tier. Next up, we have the first Avengers movie, which for me goes in the awesome tier and is one of my favorite MCU movies. I won't, spoil what I think is my absolute favorite, best MCU movie, but the Avengers movie, I love it so much for just the fact that it did something that had really never been done before. We have never had a cinematic universe done before, and, bringing all these characters that are so different from each other together is kind of a risky move, and so the fate the fate of the MCU was really all on the hands of the first Avengers movie, and it ended up being super successful. People were super excited for this movie when it came out. I remember when I was a kid, I was about 5 or 6 when this movie came out, and I was super excited for this movie when it came out. I had been hearing rumors about it, and then I saw the trailer for it, and I was like, yes, this is going to be awesome. I see all my favorite heroes that I've seen throughout these past few movies. And then when the movie came out, all my other young friends were talking about certain scenes in the movie, like the Thor and the Captain America scene. You want me to put the hammer down? Where he swings the hammer onto the shield. They were talking about things like that, the final battle sequences, all these funny jokes that were put into the first Avengers movie. I mean, just think about how many memes came out of the first Avengers movie. That is how great the humor was in this movie. And they definitely found their humor in this MCU movie, which ironically is very different from the MCU humor that we get now. They found out the correct way to do their humor, but for some reason it's very different in this first Avengers movie. I don't know why, but I really dug this movie. The humor, the battle sequences. I think the Chitauri just worked well because it was the first time, you just had these mindless army just being killed off here and there. So it just happened to work in this first Avengers movie. Loki plays as a really great villain. There are a lot of great moments in the battle in New York. Obviously Iron Man going up there to throw the missile onto the spaceship, and then he comes down, and the portal almost closes in on itself on him, and then he almost falls to his very death. And just a lot of other great moments that come with that final battle sequence. And obviously Hawkeye and Black Widow didn't really get, an origin story before this, so they're a little bit overshadowed, but they had their moments too. I think they did a really great job with their replacement for Hulk after, unfortunately, Edward Norton had to opt out of it for whatever reason. I forgot what it was. I think the way the characters are introduced to each other in this movie is done really well and in a very comedic way. So yeah, I really dig the first Avengers movie. It was an absolute success, a risky success. And that's why it gets so much credit for being able to do something that has never been done and very successfully as well. I love the first Avengers film. I think it's just the fact that it's a Phase One film. They're still discovering things. The setting that it's taking in on the flying spaceship, I really like that setting. With Nick Fury and the Agents of Shield kind of leading everything in here and trying to keep all the Avengers calm before they have to eventually find Loki and take him out. And so they're trying to kind of contain everybody and keep them in the right mood so that we're not ruining things. Right as we were trying to get all these characters together for several years. And so I think it's just all done really, really great. I love the tone. I love the atmosphere. And that's why it goes in the awesome tier. Next up is Iron Man 3, another heavily criticized MCU film, and just Iron Man film in general. But like I said, I'm a big defender of the Iron Man films, and so I'm going to be putting Iron Man 3... Oh, sorry, guys. Iron Man 3 above Iron Man 2. I dug it even more than Iron Man 2. I thought it did a really great job. I was excited for this movie when I saw the trailers for it, and then I watched it in theaters, and I loved it because as a kid, I was always a super big fan of Iron Man 3, and so seeing the Iron Legion in this film and all the different robots, and even just the Christmas theme was really, really nice in this film and added to it a whole lot. Added to the humor as well, which was surprising. So I really dug Iron Man 3. That the biggest criticism that it gets is the Mandarin twist, which I don't think is as bad as people say it is. Big comic book fans will criticize it for being so, obviously they just made Mandarin this absolute joke, that like the actual comic book Mandarin, and then just basically let Aldrich Killian take the spot. I was okay with Aldrich Killian being the main villain ultimately, and so I'm not a die-hard comic book fan who says everything must be canon and all this kind of stuff, because, I mean, I could go on a huge argument about comics, but there are way too many comics to make everything canon, because the comics already contradict themselves anyway, with how many comics we have, so not everything needs to be, methodical and done how it was supposed to be. They can break the rules a little bit. And so overall, I really, really dug Iron Man 3. I like Aldrich Killian. I think he manages to beat Ironmonger and Whiplash. If I had to make a list, I would probably do 3 Whiplash, then Ironmonger, and then Aldrich Killian. I really, really like Aldrich Killian. His just kind of witty remarks, some of the talks that he has with Tony in this movie, and we really get to see the very broken character that Tony is after the events of Avengers and how much it has really affected him. It's not only just the fact that he has that PTSD from the spaceship, but he's also having a struggling relationship with Pepper. And he has to get her back after she's taken from Killian towards the ending of the movie. So I think, that's a really interesting dynamic there. I think there's a lot of fun with the Mark 42 suit and its malfunctions and all that kind of stuff. I think it's really, really cool. By the ending of the movie, when he has the Iron Legion, that's supposed to be this really, really helpful, powerful group, and a lot of the Iron Legion robots he just ends up blowing up, getting rid of, because he realizes, like, I need to restart. I need to start over and build myself up from the bottom up, because I've really, really screwed myself up. I need to restart my relationship. I need to get back on focus and make some better goddamn suits, because some of these were like easily destroyed by these guys who just had this serum that they gave him. And so at the ending of the movie, it is really nice to see him, take the shrapnel out, not have to have an actual arc reactor in his chest. Now it's only on the suits. And just kind of not give up his legacy of Iron Man, obviously, but start over, and rebuild himself. Because at the beginning of this movie, things seemed like they were all well, but he was really, really broken. And I like the story of Aldrich Killian's character. This fan of Tony that was kind of scarred because he just kind of ignored him, never met him up on that roof that one day, and how that all caused all these events to happen. I think that's really interesting. Um, and like I said, I really like the Christmas theme in this movie. Adds to it a little bit. I like the little side plot with the kid who's he keeps talking to in this movie, and um you know kind of acting as his dad a little bit throughout the movie. I think that's really cool. I like the whole sequence where he's in Tennessee, and he's kind of stranded and has to get his way out, and then he doesn't have his suit for a while, so he has to build all these tools to help him take out all these guys in this mansion, and then find where the actual Mandarin is, and then Rhodey is here a little bit to help him here and there. There's just so many things that I love about Iron Man 3 personally, and I just think it gets way too many criticisms. For the one criticism that it gets, the Mandarin twist, the Mandarin twist, the Mandarin twist, it completely overshadows the many, many great things that are of Iron Man 3. And I think Iron Man 3 really does emphasize the greatest things about the Iron Man superhero, at least for me. I think it really just emphasizes the greatest parts about it. So Iron Man 3, I know that was a long talk, but I will strongly defend this movie, and it goes in the great tier. Next up, we got Thor: The Dark World, which is definitely a very underwhelming MCU film. I'm going to be putting it in the mediocre tier, below Hulk. I don't think it's a meh. Again, it just kind of does its job, but it does its job in a way where it does basically the bare minimum. It gives you the bare minimum for Thor, all the characters involved in it, basically. The villain, who's just this very uninteresting villain, he's just there, he's just this dark elf that's really not any different from any of the others, that wants to go after the ether, which we, find out is the reality stone. So, really, this movie is just designed to do its job. And when I saw the trailers for Thor: The Dark World, I was like, okay, sure, we're getting another Thor movie. The trailers are looking pretty good. It looks like this could be leading up to be an even better movie than the first Thor. But then you watch it, and it is just as formulaic as possible. It is just there to fill in the spot and basically just introduce the Reality Stone. That was basically the whole idea behind Thor: The Dark World, was just to introduce the Reality Stone, so that we could get that out of the way before, we get the whole Infinity Stones issue with Thanos wanting to steal all of them and everything like that. So this movie, I think, isn't, I think a lot of people fail to point out that this movie isn't necessarily bad, because, we have, an uninteresting villain, an uninteresting plot. It's just formulaic, super formulaic. It's just there to do its job. And you just have a very average Thor performance. Everything is just kind of downgraded, just so that we can just do everything that we possibly need to do. So it's certainly a downgrade from the first Thor movie. It still carries on themes from the original Thor movie. But this is just another Thor movie that kind of failed to hit the correct note. Because even the first Thor movie, which I didn't really mention that much, didn't really find the correct note that we needed for the MCU in general. Which you could argue, pretty much every movie in Phase 1 was different from each other. Each one kind of had their own unique tone. But that's probably because, again, they were trying to figure out their own tone. And Thor: The Dark World just carries on the kind of tone that we had with some of the early MCU movies. And Iron Man 3, with being the first movie in Phase 2, managed to kind of strip away from that, while also kind of having its own individuality, not being super formulaic like a lot of the later MCU movies are. But Thor: The Dark World is just super formulaic, super boring. I'm not gonna put it in the meh tier. It's just mediocre. It just does its job. I would never rewatch this film, but it's just an MCU film, basically. Next up, we got Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which I have seen people go as far as putting this film in as like their number one MCU film, which I think it's just they're wrong on that. I think this is an extremely overrated MCU film. I'm not saying it's bad or anything like that. I'm not gonna put it in where Captain America: The First Avenger is or Thor is. I'm gonna put it in the great tier, but I'm gonna put it below Iron Man 3 and 2. I don't think it's as good as people really give it credit for. Yes, the Bucky Cap story arc is really interesting. It's not so much, about, you know, Captain America trying to defeat this villain, but really win back a friend. That's what this movie is all about. So, yes, I will agree. That is a really interesting dynamic in the movie, is that it's not just your typical superhero movie where it's just superhero tries to defeat bad guy. It's more of Captain America's trying to win back this friend that he knows has been done wrong. He knows that there are two different characters in Bucky. There's Bucky himself, and then there's the Winter Soldier who has been taken over by Hydra and used for bad. And so he's just trying to win back Bucky in this movie and trying so hard to do so with somebody who's literally been mentally handicapped. Basically, it would be like trying to make Hawkeye, the Hawkeye who has been taken over by Loki in the first Avengers movie. It would be like trying to win him back, and he managed to do that in this movie. I like Nick Fury in this movie. I like Black Widow in this movie. I really like Falcon in this movie. I like the introduction of him. So I like some of the new characters that were introduced, and also the use of the some of the old characters. So I think it's a great MCU film, definitely above average, better than the first Avenger, in my opinion. But I think it's a little overrated. I think some people really, really just go out of their way to just make this film seem like it's just this above all, just it's got this amazing, astounding plot or whatever. And I don't think it's as good as people give it credit for. But Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I'll definitely put it in the great tier and give it credit for its interesting plot dynamics. Next up, you got Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'm going to put in the great tier. I think I'll put it above Iron Man 2. It's got a few less problems than Iron Man 2, certainly. Less flaws. And really, there's nothing to criticize about the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, in my opinion. It's just not, it's not this amazing film, but it's so different from all of the other MCU films. When I started out with the MCU, and, I watched some of the early films, and then I saw that Guardians of the Galaxy was coming out, and they just, it wasn't necessarily they were just trying to copy off of the Avengers and try to do another Avengers movie. But you get introduced to this whole new set of characters that are almost like this different Avengers team. It's like, wow, like, are they really going to be able to pull this off? Like, I wasn't sure about this movie. I was like, I don't think I'm really going to be able to cope with some of these characters in this movie. It's just, is it just going to be, just a bad do-over of the first Avengers film? And no, you watch this movie, and it is completely different from anything we have seen in the MCU yet, up until Phase 2, up until the moment that this movie came out. It was just completely different tone, humor, all that kind of stuff. And that's what I love about this film. It is a fun MCU film. It has the best soundtrack of the entire MCU, in my opinion. I love the soundtrack decision. It adds to the humor a lot, especially towards the end, where you have a character like Ronan that is taking things so seriously. Obviously, he's this villain that wants to gain control of this Power Stone and, take over the world or whatever. And then you have this set of characters that are just doing these dance moves in front of him, specifically Star-Lord, of course. And it is just so funny to watch. It's like watching a middle-aged woman, just show her human-like features to this alien, who's like, what the hell are you doing? And it is just so awesome. I love it so much. And so, yeah, all the characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy all have their unique role and do a good job. Yeah, like Star-Lord, Drax, Raccoon, all of them really funny. Gamora's kind of different. Not so much supposed to be the funny character, but they expand on her more, obviously, later in the MCU. Ronan is, I think, he's a good villain for this film. I like that they actually, unlike Thor: Love and Thunder, it was funny to see a serious villain like Ronan in this movie because he was basically being laughed at the ending of the movie, which was so satisfying to see when they're doing these dance off, the dance off and all that kind of stuff by the end of the movie. It was so fun to watch. And then obviously we have that very emotional. They managed to make a line such as "We are Groot," such an emotional, impactful line in this film. And then on top of that, just thinking of Vin Diesel as being Groot is just so weird to think about. Obviously, he's the character in the Fast and Furious that is talking about family all the time, and then you got Groot, and he's like, "We are Groot," and it's just really incredible. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, it's the best way to describe this MCU film is just fun. It's just really fun. There's a lot of fun to be had with this movie, and yeah, it goes in the great tier. Next up, we got Avengers: Age of Ultron, which I'm gonna put in the great tier, below Guardians of the Galaxy, right smack dab in the middle there. This Avengers film, for being an Avengers film that is probably the weakest out of the four, is still a really great MCU movie. Avengers movies obviously held to a very high standard. They need to be action pumped. They need to be climactic. They need to be big. Everything like that. And Avengers: Age of Ultron is still a really great film. The main thing that brings it down for a lot of people, which I'm not really sure what they could have done more with his character, but it's it's Ultron. Like a lot of people feel there could have been more done with Ultron, but I'm just not really sure what they could have done. Yeah, you could have had him for a second movie, but you would have been trying to have 5 Avengers films out, 3 in one phase probably. So you would have had Avengers: Age of Ultron, and then if you want to do a second film with Ultron where they eventually defeat him, you're gonna need to do that, sometime later in phase 2. So you're gonna have to extend phase 2 a little bit longer. It would have been really weird. So Ultron is kind of placed in the middle of this Infinity Saga, and I think that's kind of what brought him down, where they kind of had to just get him out of the way. I really wish they could have done more, because it would have been really cool to see Ultron go on to do even bigger things with his plan to take over the world with all these AI robots. But, it is what it is, and Avengers: Age of Ultron, it does its job as an Avengers film. It's really nice to have had all 3 of our main superheroes in the MCU had their second films where they've evolved a little bit more before this film. So you have Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor have all gone through new experiences, have all learned a little bit more, and so now they are ready to be put into this new Avengers film as different characters. Obviously, Stark has learned from his mistakes in the past few films, and he still makes another huge mistake in this film, but he has still learned from his mistakes quite a bit. But then again, the whole the whole first 3 phases of the MCU were a learning curve for for Stark. And then you get, obviously, what's his name, Quicksilver and Wanda introduced in this film. It's really weird seeing them introduced in this film, but I guess they kind of needed a few side characters here to help out Ultron, other than just a bunch of mindless robots. So it's a little bit weird seeing them introduced and having to play the bad side in this movie. Especially with a character like Wanda. Like, when I first saw Wanda get introduced, I didn't really know her character very well from the comics. So it's really weird seeing her kind of as a weaker, lower end character in this movie, and then now she's at least in Multiverse of Madness, just this super powerful villain. A little bit weird. And then some people give this movie criticism for killing off Quicksilver in the same film that he was introduced in. and I don't really know what to say. I mean, what else would have they really have done with Quicksilver? He just would have been another side character maybe. So it was nice to have that. Kind of added a little bit more to Hawkeye in this film, I guess. That's really what he filled in the spot for. So I don't really know what they would have done with Quicksilver. Like, I have all these criticisms. Everybody else has all these criticisms, but they don't really know what they could have done better. It's just kind of underwhelming. But Avengers Age of Ultron is still a really enjoyable MCU film, an Avengers film, and it goes in the great tier. Next up, you got Ant-Man, which I'm actually going to be putting above Captain America, the First Avenger, and Thor. That's not to say that it's exactly better than Captain America or Thor. I think it's probably at the same level. But I had a little bit more fun with Ant-Man than I did with Captain America, the First Avenger, and Thor. And yeah, it's a very simple, lighthearted MCU movie, like all the other Ant-Man movies have been. You know, they're meant to be lighthearted, small scale, which fits the fits the character of Ant-Man very well. But I think there is a little bit more to dig into with Ant-Man than people give him credit for. I think it's really interesting how he started out as this guy who was trying to set up a heist to steal this suit, which obviously he was successful in, and then eventually does use it for the good. And then you have a very generic villain, albeit, but it makes for a kind of fun final battle sequence. So Ant-Man, it does its job, but it has some pretty good humor in it. Obviously, Paul Rudd is a really great actor, so he adds to it that much more. And so, yeah, Ant-Man fills in its spot, but I think the character of Ant-Man is kind of interesting with, when you look back at where he started out as just this guy who was trying to steal the suit and then ended up using it for good. I like how they kind of held back a few more of the fun parts that we could have with Ant-Man by not introducing the Ant-Man getting big yet and just keeping it as he only gets small in this movie. So I like how they kind of paced it out. So that was kind of a smart decision by them. So yeah, Ant-Man does its job, and is just a very simple MCU film, but yet is still very effective. Kicking off Phase 3, you got Captain America Civil War, which I don't know if I want to put it as a top tier or great, at the top of great. I think it's not enough. For me, it's not quite enough to be in the awesome tier, but it will go in the great tier, certainly at the top of that great tier. I don't think it is as great as people give it credit for. I'm not one of those people that really, just sits, spends 24 hours of their day thinking who is right in this situation, in this very interesting dilemma between, Iron Man's side and Captain America's side. Like, I'm not pondering about that interesting dynamic of this movie for hours straight and just raving it and just giving it so much attention and putting it on this podium and saying, look at how great this film is because of this. And I think that's what a lot of people do with Civil War, and a lot of other MCU movies, is they take this one aspect of the plot, put it on this podium and say, look at how great this is, and then they kind of just forget about all of the kind of mediocre elements of the movie. Which I should have explained a little bit more with The Winter Soldier, but the same kind of goes with Civil War, so you can just assume what I would say for The Winter Soldier as well. I think some of the characters that were introduced in this movie and or were reintroduced after having a small role in another movie, just kind of were there. I don't know. They were just kind of there to be a part of one team or the other. Especially T'Challa, Black Panther. It was just like, hey, we got Black Panther now, so stay tuned for when we have a Black Panther film and explain this all to you. And he was just kind of there. It was like, so wait, how exactly is T'Challa all of a sudden on Iron Man's side about it? They just threw in characters and put them on a team and said, let's just say this character sides with this character and this character sides with this character. Obviously, somebody like Rhodey is going to be with Iron Man. Somebody like Vision, who Iron Man literally created, is going to be under his control, and so he's going to be on his team. But they basically just said, let's have Black Widow be on Iron Man's team, and let's have Hawkeye be on Captain America's team, and let's just have these characters fight against each other because of what was it again? It was like some kind of dilemma over what should happen with the Avengers or something like that. And yeah, it was interesting how it was created. You know, the actual villain of this movie, forget his name, but the guy who started all this chaos and divided up the Avengers. I think that's an interesting dynamic where this movie kind of sets up Avengers Infinity War perfectly in a way that made it so that they would lose in Avengers Infinity War because they were a split team and they were divided because of this one character who just he saw the weakness in the Avengers and so brought up something and caused this huge fight for them. But the reason why they're fighting, I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. I could see why it's emotional, especially when you get into the way that Iron Man's parents were killed aspect. That is certainly very emotional, but the military part doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But if they're going to choose any characters to fight over each other, I think Captain America versus Iron Man probably makes the most sense. I mean, they're two very different characters. So, yeah, Civil War, I think it's a little bit too idolized, but it is still a really great film. Obviously, lots of great battle sequences. Really great to just see Iron Man and Captain America fight to the absolute death in this movie. And having the Bucky and Cap going against him at the same time, too, at the end there. So, really cool. For the first time, we get to see Ant-Man be big, so we get a little bit of that fun, too. Yeah, we just get a little bit of action from all these different heroes in the Avengers, and so it's really nice to see. It's kind of like a mini Avengers film in a sense, but instead they're going against each other. So, Captain America Civil War, it goes at the top of the great tier, but I'm not going to put it in the awesome tier. Up, you got Doctor Strange, which I'm going to put at the top of the good/average tier. I don't think it's enough to be a great, but there are some things that really do stick out with Doctor Strange. And before I pick out those things, a few of the underwhelming aspects, I think there could have been a little bit more done with the villains in this movie. Both of the villains in this movie were very underwhelming. You have a character as big as Dormammu, who is defeated simply because Doctor Strange was able to discover the Time Stone, skip ahead in time so that he could learn how to do all of this stuff, and then just put him in a time loop and annoy him so that he was basically forced to give up. I think is really boring. I think there could have been a better way to have Dormammu introduced, and maybe they could even have chose to introduce Dormammu later in the MCU because he is a very big villain. I don't know. Again, this is another one of those films where like I have criticisms about its villains or whatever, but I'm not really sure what they could have done differently to make it better. I really wish they wouldn't have done Dormammu dirty like that. But what this film really exposed was the many loopholes that you have when you introduce certain powers into the MCU, and that those loopholes get larger and larger throughout the MCU films when you have these super overpowered characters, unnecessarily overpowered, mind you. And so when you introduce an element such as time travel, which under the Time Stone really doesn't create as many issues as something like the Quantum Realm does, right? Because the Quantum Realm is an artificial time machine, so you are going to have to deal with all this problem. So with something like the Time Stone, it kind of just does all the work for you. And so Doctor Strange essentially just gets to learn everything because he discovers the Time Stone, learns how to use it, and is able to just skip in time and become the Sorcerer Supreme by learning everything that quickly. So it just feels like he was kind of cheated, kind of like with Captain America. It just feels like he's a little cheated, and I just wish it really wasn't that way. Maybe something different that could have made it so that, you can't just use the Time Stone to instantly learn this knowledge of the mystic arts and stuff like that. But what I do love about this film, that's all the bad, but what I do love about this film is that the introduction to the mystic arts makes for some really great cinematography, some just cinematography that we have never seen in the MCU film. This kaleidoscope, illusionary, mannerisms and configurations of the camera that just make everything look odd and weird and really cool. I love it. I really dig it. I dig the mystic arts and just all the different things you can do with it. I think the actor who plays Doctor Strange, frickin' forget his name. I'm not gonna try to look it up right now, but I think he does a really great job. Fits the character well. Wong is a funny character. You have a few humorous characters that are introduced into this movie that kind of sprinkled throughout the MCU here and there, such as Wong, and then the other dude who I forget his name, who is also in the art school. And then you have the Ancient One and how she's introduced, and you just see you see Doctor Strange, who is completely oblivious to all the things she is capable of, and then she pulls out the move for the first time, palm heals him, and then knocks his soul out of his body, and it's just really, really cool to see. I love it. And so the introduction to the mystic arts is just really fun. I like it. And it's something that we've never really seen in the MCU before. So Doctor Strange, I don't think it's enough to be in the great tier, but it is, I think, slightly above average, and definitely above Ant-Man, Captain America, the First Avenger, and Thor. Next up, you have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I'm going to put it in the mediocre tier above The Incredible Hulk. There are some people who love this film. There's some people who don't like this film. I'm kind of in between with it. I'm sure other people might have put it in the meh tier just because of all the criticisms that they have with Ego and the other villain in this movie, Taserface or whatever. All their criticism that they have for it. But for me, it's not even really the villains. Sure, Ego and the villains that we have in this movie could have been done better, but I don't know. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 really just, to me, is a big downgrade from the first Guardians of the Galaxy. They tried to redo all of the elements, and they just don't hit the right note this time. And I don't know what it is. Just all the humor in this movie didn't really land for me. Well, at least most of it. And so it was really unfortunate to see when I watched this movie. I was excited because I was like, I had a lot of fun with the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, and then I watched this film, and the humor just, they kept trying and to come back to the original theme, and they just never landed on the right note like they did with the first Guardians of the Galaxy. And you get some new characters introduced into the Guardians of the Galaxy that I just not a big fan of either. Like Mantis, Nebula is introduced a little bit more, integrated into this a little bit more than in the first film. You got Yondu as well, and I don't think any of those other characters that may have been introduced in the first Guardians of the Galaxy but are put into the spotlight a little bit more in this one, I just don't think they're utilized to their fullest potential, in my opinion. Yondu, I'd probably put him at the top, but characters like Mantis and Nebula, I don't think really got their chance in the spotlight. Mantis definitely never got a chance in the spotlight that much, except for maybe the one part in Avengers Infinity War where she's helping out the team. But Nebula obviously plays a little bit of a bigger role when you get to films like Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Same with Gamora, obviously. But for right now, Gamora and Nebula are just kind of there, in my opinion, and never really that interesting to me. Even when you get to Infinity War and Endgame, I really just think they were just a plot device, in my opinion, which I'll talk about later. So, yeah, this film, it just really didn't think like, or it really just didn't feel like the characters were all at their best performance. It felt really, really mediocre, and like they just weren't able to land on the right notes this time. So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I hope they will redeem themselves with Volume 3. Hopefully they will get set back on track, but for right now, Volume 2 puts them in this kind of weird spot. And even Thor Love and Thunder kind of shooed the Guardians of the Galaxy away as well, so it's kind of weird to see. But yeah, let's move on to the next one. Next up, we got Spider-Man Homecoming. which is a very light-hearted MCU film, but unlike Ant-Man, that is going for kind of this simple plot, very light-hearted, a little bit more humorous, probably, a little bit more humor, more often than not. But Spider-Man Homecoming actually ends up being a pretty good film. So I'm going to put it in the great tier, below Captain America the Winter Soldier, but right up there in the great tier with all these other movies. I think it's really, really great. When they introduced Spider-Man in Civil War, I really wasn't sure about him. I was like, they've already done Spider-Man twice, obviously with Sam Raimi and The Amazing Spider-Man, and I am a huge fan of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. So when I saw that they were going to be redoing Spider-Man again, I was like, oh my god, please don't tell me they go anywhere further with Spider-Man than in this first film, because it was really cringy, some of the Spider-Man scenes we had in there. Because you have a much more mature Spider-Man in the Sam Raimi and Amazing Spider-Man films. And in this film, what is he supposed to be, like 14 in this film? Which is just crazy to think about, because Tom Holland's like 25 now. And so you get this really immature Spider-Man and this very preppy outfit, and he's just kind of here and there helping Iron Man out, and it's really weird, and I did not like it. And so when I heard they're making a Spider-Man Homecoming, I was like, I'm not really sure about this. Then I watched the film, and I absolutely loved it. The humor, probably some of the best that we've seen in the MCU, especially with it being light-hearted high school humor. It just adds to the comedic effect a lot more, especially with his friend, again, forget what his freaking name is in this movie, but his friend in this movie, he had some really, really funny moments in this movie. MJ, at the moment, is kind of this side, shy character who is kind of just there for a little bit of comedic relief here and there. So for right now, his love interest, weirdly enough, is just this other kind of prettier face, more popular girl. But it turns out that she's actually the daughter of the villain in this movie, and that adds a lot to this movie. And that's the main thing that I really like about this movie, is that they managed to make something as small scale as, from what we've seen in the Avengers by now. Like, you can't, it's really hard to go back to something like what we had in Iron Man and, a few other MCU films, like, with going that small scale. It's really hard to make an intriguing MCU movie with something as small scale as that. But they managed to make it work. It's, with that one scene where he goes into the car to drive with his date to Homecoming, and we see Vulture turn around, and he sees him in there, and they have that little exchange in the car. And it's just, it's such it's a small scene, but it's just so great. Vulture, a great villain. Looks like they're going to be doing more with him, as we've seen in Morbius, which, I mean, out of all films to, continue his arc and get us excited for, Morbius is probably not the one to do it with, but they're going to do it, it looks like they're going to be doing more with him, so I'm excited to see that. But Vulture, I think he did a great job in this movie. I think his side henchmen in this film, like such as the Shockers, add to some of the cool scenes in this movie. Overall, really dug Homecoming, lighthearted film. Obviously, I know that they were trying to build up to the character development of Spider-Man throughout these 3 Spider-Man films. But even then, still not a huge fan of Iron Man basically doing everything for him, creating the suit with all these features and things like that. Not into the kind of Captain or the Spider-Man Iron Man hybrid thing. Not really a huge fan of that, but they fixed that, so it has definitely helped this movie over the years. Next up, we got Thor Ragnarok, which finally managed to find the correct note for the Thor movies. Unfortunately, it was at the ending of, well, they made Thor Love and Thunder, I guess, but finally managed to find the correct note for the Thor movies. And so I'm going to be putting it, I'm I think I'm gonna put it above Homecoming, but not above the Winter Soldier. Definitely an above average MCU film. Definitely better than Thor and Thor: The Dark World, with being able to find that correct theme, and also having a good villain, a good good performance by all of the characters. And we sort of had a kind of a mini superhero team in this movie. We had Loki, Valkyrie, Hulk, and Thor in this movie, fighting off Gila. So by the end of the film, you got Hulk fighting off the big orange. I can't remember all these characters' names, so I'm sorry, guys, but you know what I mean. You got Hulk fighting off some of these bigger villains at the ending of the movie, which is really cool to see. It's the last we get of the original Thor. I guess we get a little bit of him in Avengers Infinity War, but it's like one small scene with Thanos where he gets absolutely destroyed. But this is the last we get of OG Thor, who still it has gained a lot of consciousness, kind of start to understand humans a lot more than he was at the beginning. So it's the last we get of OG Thor before we get that stupid Professor Hulk, unfortunately. But Thor Ragnarok, still really great film, and evolved Thor's character quite a bit. Obviously, they found the correct note for the humor and the tone and the theme and all that kind of stuff with this more colorful theme. Taika Waititi kind of took the spot and just dominated. He kind of set it in stone. He's like, I know exactly what the Thor movies need, and he just did the job with it. And with some of the new characters, it really helped, like characters such as Korg and the one headmaster or whatever, who's kind of like he's the host of these fights and things like that. I forget what his freaking name is, because I forget every character's name in the MCU. But you get characters like that really help elevate the thing that Taika Waititi was trying to do with kind of reshaping the MCU film in a way that he felt was gonna really help the Thor movies. But what I really like about Thor Ragnarok, and I think what is actually what makes it better than the first Thor and the Thor: The Dark World is, he finally gets his kind of ultimate reality check. You get a reality check kind of in the first Thor movie when he comes down to Earth, but in this movie, he kind of learns how to use his powers to not be so reliant on Mjolnir, while also just having even more powerful powers than he did before. He learns how to use his lightning powers without Mjolnir. And, you kind of have those ironic scenes where he's being tased and all this kind of stuff. But he kind of learns not to rely on Mjolnir, and at the same time use his power to an even greater degree. And so when he is fighting Gila and his eye gets cut out, and then he finally kind of realizes, in that moment, like, what, how to use his powers without Mjolnir, and, takes out Gila, temporarily, I think, and then comes out of the building, comes down, absolutely destroys all of these, whatever, mindless henchmen, whatever. And it's a really cool scene to see. Obviously we have Onan passing away in this movie, which was very emotional. But I think the right movie to do it in. Again, kind of that wake-up call for Thor Ragnarok, a second wake-up call. And so that was really, I think it was correctly placed in this Thor Ragnarok movie. So, yeah, Thor Ragnarok, dug it. When I saw the trailer for it, I was like, this looks different, but I'm still not sure about it. And then I watched the film and really, really dug it. Especially, I think what solidified it for me was that earlier scene where he's fighting against Hulk, and he's like, "No, I know you, stop," and he's like trying not to, harm Hulk or whatever, but he kind of has to for the sake of his life. So that was kind of what solidified it for me. Like, this feels different, and I'm already digging it. So, Thor Ragnarok goes in the great tier. Next up, we got Black Panther, which is probably gonna make some people a little bit mad. I am gonna be putting Black Panther probably in the good slash average tier, in the kind of in the middle of probably. I'm going to put it right in the middle between Captain America the First Avenger and the first Thor movie. I think it's on pretty much the same level as Ant-Man, Captain America the First Avenger, and Thor. I think it is a highly overrated MCU movie. There are some people who put this on the top, they put it right here above, probably above the Avengers, and say, this is a great MCU film. It just transcended all of the expectations, and it was an incredible historical movie or whatever. Like, no, it really wasn't. It was average at best. Again, just did its job like a lot of other origin stories have done. There are some good things about the Black Panther movie, which I'll get out of the way before I talk about why I think it's super overrated. Killmonger makes for a good villain. There are a few interesting side characters in this film that on the Wakanda army that I like. Diana Gari, or whatever her name is. Her performance in this movie I think is really great. And yeah, there's just not really M'Baku, is another good character, but I think that's really all the things that stand out for me in this movie. Everything else to me is pretty average, and so I'm going to explain to you why I think this movie is highly overrated. First of all, obviously it's very tragic that somebody like Chadwick Boseman passed away, and it probably wouldn't have been in their best interest to just replace him. With how many films he's played Black Panther in already. So, I really don't think that he had been the character long enough, though, to consider him as an irreplaceable, super great actor, did the job perfectly. I think there could have been other people that could have played Black Panther just as good as Chadwick Boseman. And that's not to take anything away from him. He's an amazing actor, and he starred in some even better films, in my opinion. There are better films that he has played in than Black Panther, in my opinion, that have earned him the awards that he has gotten. But Black Panther, I really think it is extremely overrated. The whole, King takes the throne, but he, gets overthrown and he has to earn his spot back because you have this, other greedy guy, has been done before. This kind of thing. I don't know how to explain the plot fully, but it has been done before. It's not unique to this movie, and I think a lot of people, especially progressives, not to just put them in the spotlight or whatever, but like to embrace this film so much because it's supposed to fight back against European colonialism or whatever, because Europeans bad for trying to use the African countries' resources and things like that. And I just find that really stupid, because something like vibranium, I kind of understand, why they wouldn't be willing to give up the resource. No other place on Earth supposedly has this vibranium, and they don't want to have other countries to use vibranium for bad. But then again, you have characters as strong as Thor, Wanda. You have villains as strong as Gila and Ronin, and eventually Thanos, and you're worried that European forces are going to use vibranium for bad when you have all of these other villains. It's kind of, again, it's that problem that the MCU has with having so many characters and so many superpowers that, like, there's just this extreme hierarchy where when you try to make something seem like a threat, you're like, well, there was a bigger threat before, so why exactly is this a threat? And that's kind of the problem with this movie, where people try to embrace that, which I think is just really stupid, and is what really brought politics into the MCU, which I just don't think was a good idea, and I just don't think, it just doesn't sit well with me with the Black Panther movie. I'm not really a huge fan of it. I could have done something a little bit different. But now when you have a film like Black Panther Wakanda Forever, where we realize, like, Wakanda is not the only country that has vibranium, it makes no sense that they're not willing to get rid of all these resources. So I know that's kind of a plot criticism, and I probably shouldn't go into too much depth, but I just really think it's an extremely overrated MCU film. It's not bad, but it's also not great. It's just your average MCU origin story, in my opinion, and I really just don't think it is as good as people would like to believe it is. So I'm putting it where it is, and you can fight me for that. We got Avengers Infinity War, which I'm going to be putting absolutely in the awesome tier, but not above the first Avengers. And I think I'm gonna tell you why, but there are certainly, obviously, a lot of great things to go over with this movie. Obviously, it goes even bigger than the first Avengers movie and just brings in basically all the characters we have had introduced, going up against Thanos, who finally is put into the spotlight. He's been foreshadowed since the first Avengers movie, and finally decides to take things into his own hands and go after the Infinity Stones. And it's really scary to see, Infinity Stone by Infinity Stone, as he just keeps acquiring one after the other and taking out all these powerful characters that we have been introduced to and we have worked up to for so long, and he's just steamrolling them as he goes by, not completely destroying them, but just getting past them and accomplishing his mission and not letting anything get in his way. And I think the interesting thing about Thanos is that he is not out to kill. He simply has a mission, and he's not going to let anything get in his way. And so he doesn't feel the need to kill anybody, but he is not going to let them interfere with him. He is going to get his mission done, and it just shows you, despite not really having any powers necessarily, he's just this Eternal Titan variant. He is a very strong guy. I mean, physically, he's got very good fighting skills. You can tell that he's very knowledgeable and has a lot of experience in certain things that allow him to be able to accomplish his mission. Obviously, having really good fighting skills, being very knowledgeable, knowing where the Infinity Stones are, knowing what he has to do to kind of convince certain people to do certain things. Obviously, he had his side henchmen, which I think did a great job in this movie, and actually did pose a significant threat themselves in this movie, which is something that, a lot of other movies kind of failed to do, is, make the side characters actually matter. But in this movie, they actually did pose a significant threat, and kind of allowed them to kind of spread them throughout all these different teams in this movie, and go after them. But, once they all kind of fail, Thanos kind of has to take the role and take the Infinity Stone for himself. He can't rely on anybody else by now. He just kind of has to do it all by himself. And he eventually ends up taking out every single character, basically, until he gets all 6 Infinity Stones, snaps his fingers, which, honestly, I was surprised about. I was surprised that he won in this film. I thought that he was going to be defeated in this film. And so I knew once the movie was over that, yes, they were probably going to make a follow-up movie in the upcoming years. But I really wasn't expecting him to win. So it was just a very shocking moment when it happened, because they were this close to defeating him twice. And so, maybe they had a sequel planned prior, and so some people might not have been as surprised as I was, but I was very surprised. And it was the first time where the heroes were actually defeated, and in a very majorly threatening way. Like, something needs to happen now, or we're gonna be stuck with this big scar and wound on in the universe forever. So we need to do something about it. And obviously that carries on into Avengers Endgame, and that's kind of Avengers Endgame's responsibility now to kind of take on the role. But Avengers Infinity War, they kind of the Russo brothers foreshadowed their abilities to make a really good movie, action pumped, while still having really good character dynamics. and they just bring it all out in Avengers Infinity War and make for a really entertaining MCU movie with some really good battle sequences. Especially that battle sequence between Doctor Strange and Thanos, or just the whole Titan sequence in general was really cool. Frustrating at some points because you had Star-Lord mess up the whole thing. But, battle sequences between Doctor Strange, between Doctor Strange and Thanos, and they have that little conversation before. And the battle sequence between, let's not forget, Iron Man and Thanos, who, for a while, we haven't really known that they have been this interconnected until they kind of pointed out in this movie, and you're like, yeah, they kind of have been for this long, haven't they? Like, Thanos and the whole, the whole events that happened in the Avengers is what kind of left a big hole in Tony, and you can see just his drive and passion to defeat Thanos, and he just uses everything at his disposal to defeat him with his nanotech suit, and manages to do more damage than Wanda and Captain Marvel, and even Thor, arguably. I mean, obviously, he put the huge wound in his axe, but he still wasn't able to kill him. But Iron Man was able to hold his own for almost 2 minutes and make him bleed. Make him bleed with a suit that he completely was all made by him. No superpowers whatsoever. And so at this movie is when I really realized the important role of Iron Man. I really realized, why they chose to have him as the central character of the MCU film, and why they kicked him off with him. They really emphasized it in this movie, and ultimately he had to take the ultimate sacrifice, as we know, in Avengers Endgame, and finally concluded his own arc. So this film explained it, Endgame kind of concluded it, so I really liked that as well. Now, a few things that bring it down a little bit for me. First of all, the only reason I don't like it as much as the first Avengers film, I think, is just because of the tone. Avengers Infinity War has that very new, modern MCU feel, where it's very formulaic. A lot of the humor in this movie is very formulaic, in my opinion. There's still some good humor, but it's just, everything about this movie still feels very MCU-like, and I wish more MCU films had more individuality, but not so, how do you want to say it, not so, separated from everything else, where it just doesn't feel like an MCU film, or has this really bad separation from all the other films, such as The Incredible Hulk. I wish it had this nice balance, and that's what I liked about some of the earlier MCU films, is they had this perfect balance with Captain America, the First Avenger, Thor, and Iron Man, and Iron Man 2. And so the Avengers, that's what I really loved it for, because number one, it was the first time they did it, and number two, I just loved the humor, I loved the tone, I loved the theme, it all worked for me really great. But for Avengers Infinity War, not so much. But the main criticism that I have for it is, I'm still debating whether or not I would have liked the team to be split up in the movie. I like it on one hand because it splits them up into different teams. It gives them a logical reason for splitting up into different teams and defending certain Infinity Stones, so you can have, different portions of the film. But on another hand, it brings down certain characters, such as Captain America, where Captain America in this film doesn't even go by Captain America. He just goes by Steve in this movie, has these two, shields, and he's not even Captain America in this movie. And yeah, I understand why, because the Avengers split up, so he's not really kind of the leader in it, anymore. And he still had his great moments. Obviously the moment where, Proxima Midnight threw the spear, he catches it, and that's how he's introduced. Badass scene. Or the scene where he's desperately trying to fight against Thanos and giving his last breath before he snaps his fingers and gets the last stone. It's really great, but it's this one movie where we had Captain America be Steve Rogers, and it's just really, really strange. Almost every character in this film just had this neutral position that was really awkward for me. So it's always left me thinking, was it a good idea to split them up? For the most part, probably, but it still brings along a few issues. which is also why it brings down Civil War a little bit for me as well. So Avengers Infinity War, though, still a really great film, still very enjoyable and very rewatchable, so it goes at the awesome tier. Right, next up we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I am recording this on a different day, of course. Had to take a little interval in between the two takes, but anyways, we have now reached Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I think this is another kind of light-hearted one. I don't think I like it as much as the first Ant-Man, but it still works really well. I think I'll put Ant-Man and the Wasp at the bottom of the good/average tier. I still had a lot of fun with it, just as I did with the first Ant-Man. But I don't know. I think the first Ant-Man worked for me, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's kind of a slight downgrade in my opinion. I'm not really a huge fan of the Ant-Man Wasp duo. I don't think it's really that, cute or interesting or whatever. But Ant-Man and the Wasp pretty much just brings back, all the good elements that were in the first Ant-Man. The humor, especially with Michael Pena. I forgot to mention that with the first Ant-Man. I think he really adds a lot to it. He certainly does here. And of course, we have the fun with, Ant-Man also being able to get super big now, and there's these, fun car chase scenes in it and stuff like that. The antagonist that we have in this movie, Ghost, and then the other character, not all that interesting, but, you don't really need anything big when it comes to the Ant-Man movies. So yeah, it's a very lighthearted film, but it surprisingly does set up Endgame pretty well with the whole quantum realm stuff. And after this movie was released, that's where a lot of the theories were coming in for how they were going to defeat Thanos in Endgame, and the quantum realm kind of set that up really, really nicely. So for that, actually, I think I am going to bring it up a little bit. It takes them a while to get to it, and it especially isn't really revealed until like the ending of the movie. The type of role that it's gonna play. So I think I'm gonna put Ant-Man and the Wasp above Captain America: The First Avenger for that, because it's a really, really nice setup movie while also being really lighthearted. It's nice to have something kind of lighthearted after the ending of Avengers Infinity War. So, yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp does its job. I just don't think it is as good as Ant-Man and its kind of first impressions that movie had. Next up, we got Captain Marvel, and I want to be extremely generous here with where I place this, but I'm not feeling it. Like, I don't know. I really want to put it up in this mediocre tier, but I think I'm gonna leave it at the meh tier. It's gonna be the first MCU movie that goes in the meh tier. It's not bad. Some people really over exaggerate how bad some of these MCU movies are and say it's they just really over exaggerated. To be honest, I was kind of a little bit excited for when the Captain Marvel movie was coming out. Obviously they hinted at it at the end of Avengers Infinity War with Nick Fury on his little signal device. So when I first watched this movie, I did get a little bit of a kick out of it with the villain of, I believe it's Talos, and those elves that are able to, change form and, mimic other people. I think that is an interesting element that has never been done in the MCU before, and, makes for an interesting villain. But what really drags this movie down, and I really, before I get on to the bad stuff, I really wish they put more attention on the Talos and even brought him back. I don't know if they're gone for good yet, but I really wish they brought him back because I think they work really, really well for this movie. But unfortunately, this movie just puts the focus on the other kind. There's kind of two other villains in this movie. Obviously, you have I'm not good at keeping track of some of these names in these movies, but you have that one older gal, and then you have the kind of mentor dude who's training her, and then by the ending of the movie, he's not going to stand a chance against Captain Marvel. I think you know who I'm talking about. I just wish they wouldn't have had paid so much attention on them and just had more fun with the Talos or whatever they were called. Because I think I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more. I really hope that they bring them back. I'm not sure if they're done. Because I don't think she necessarily just got rid of them or defeated them by the end of the movie, but she was able to get past them. I guess you want to say. I like how they bring Ronan back for a brief moment. Made for a cool scene, but again, what really drags this movie down is just focusing on the stuff that I'm not really so much interested in. So maybe that's just more of an issue for me on my part. But what a lot of people have a problem with this movie is that Brie Larson, like again, like nothing against her or anything like that, but she really makes it hard for you to enjoy her character with her presence and the way she acts around other people and just thinking that she's better than everybody else in a way that it feels like it's not the writers who are doing that, it's just Brie Larson who is doing that. And so it just feels really forced and really arrogant from her and just makes her very unlikable. Um, and it really just felt like they forced this movie in because Brie Larson got the role for Captain Marvel and really wanted to play in Avengers Endgame, and so they just gave her what they wanted. Because think about it, this movie came out not even 2 months before Avengers Endgame, so this movie is only gonna be doing good in theaters for about a month, and then Endgame's just gonna completely overshadow it. So it just seems like they just had to force this movie in before Endgame so that they could give Brie Larson her role. And I think it would have just been better to wait for her to join in Phase Four. I think she was more of kind of a Phase Four character in my opinion, and she was really just a plot device in Avengers Endgame to save Nebula and Iron Man. So I don't know. I don't really like that. I think there could have been another way they could have done that. In many other ways they could have done that. They could have just been on the spaceship and made it back to Earth somehow. Nebula and Iron Man they could have figured it out. But no, they had to force Captain Marvel into it, and she really just didn't even play that big of a role in Endgame anyway. So yeah, it's just the character, the way they write the way they write the main character in this movie. I don't know if it's the writers or I don't know if it's Brie Larson herself, but they make it a very unlikable uh, main character, and I just really wish they would pay more attention to the Talos, I believe, the green shape shifting elves. But I think Nick Fury does add quite a bit of comedic relief in this movie, which I didn't really see coming. I don't really see Nick Fury as much of a comedic character in the MCU, but Samuel L. Jackson himself is quite a comedic guy, and he can add a lot of comedic relief to certain movies. And so I really liked how they kind of just let Samuel L. Jackson just kind of be himself in this movie. And I think it kind of makes sense because this movie is obviously taking place in the 90s, and so he's not quite on the Avengers initiative yet. He's not. He doesn't. He doesn't know that aware. He's not aware that there's going to be a big threat coming here pretty soon with Loki, and so he's kind of just hands free, just doing his own thing. And so we just get kind of pure Samuel L. Jackson in this movie, which I do enjoy. So there is quite a bit of good humor in here, not from Brie Larson, not from our main character, but from Samuel L. Jackson and his cat that he had in the movie as well. So yeah, Captain Marvel, it's gonna go at the Met here. I really want to be generous and put it more up further, but I'm gonna leave it here for now. We've reached the culmination of the Infinity Saga. We got Avengers Endgame, which I don't think is quite as good as Infinity War, but it's still going to absolutely go at that awesome tier. I think it gets a little bit more criticism than is warranted. A lot of people criticize it for, putting too much time on just talking, and, they criticize, the first two acts are very, very slow and things like that. But I actually really enjoy that. I think this is a movie where something like a slow build-up can actually work. We spent the first act kind of getting everybody back together, seeing how everybody is doing, and seeing where everybody's at. Maybe the first 15 minutes, obviously, right after Avengers Infinity War, and we kind of get to see, how Thanos is spending his time right now, and they think by just killing Thanos that it's going to fix everything. But it turns out it doesn't. And so they kind of just give up for 5 years, and we get to see how again, we just get to see how everybody has kind of moved on and went about their own lives. The only part of that I don't like is Fat Thor. I really think that was unnecessary and just a stupid part about this movie. Like, it pains me that you watch this movie and you'll forever have the one movie where Thor is just fat for whatever reason. I really hate that. But everything else I think is really good with the characters that kind of just spread out and went on their own. Iron Man finally getting his own life for once. They adopted a kid, I think, and he's living out in this house, away from everybody. I think is really, really nice. Again, not a big fan of Professor Hulk. There are a few characters where they did him wrong. And Hulk, I really don't think I'm going to put Hulk all on Avengers Endgame. I really think it's just the MCU as a whole that really just did Hulk dirty. And just, as we progressed throughout the MCU, they just brought him down further and further and further. And I'm not really enjoying what they have been doing with Hulk. So I'm not going to put that all on Avengers Endgame, but obviously not a huge fan of Professor Hulk. But yeah, most of the characters I think they did a good job with. Black Widow I think they did a good job with. Hawkeye they did a good job with. They set up a lot of those kind of Phase 4 shows, which is really nice. And Captain America finally, or I guess I should say Steve Rogers finally kind of getting back to his original role, which was nice as well. So, yeah, I really like how this movie, it really does play out in 3 different parts, and it's easy to see it, and it has this very smooth transition where we spend the first hour getting to know where everybody is at, and then Ant-Man kind of comes up with this idea like, hey, what if we did this, which was set up by Ant-Man and the Wasp. And so in the second part, we get them acquiring all the stones, which is really fun to go back and look at, all of these past movies and where the Infinity Stones were acquired and things like that. Really cool to go back to New York City in the first Avengers film, back to Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014, Asgard, all these different places. It's just really, really fun to see. And obviously you have that very emotional scene that was really unexpected for Black Widow and Hawkeye in this movie. They didn't know that they were going to have to do this sacrifice. So a really cool scene between the two of them, and you could see kind of how broken both of the characters are, and they both think that their life is really just meaningless. In the end, Black Widow says, you can get your family back. You have a chance if you just let me go. You can get your family back. I have nothing. And I think that's a really good spot, too. And then, obviously, the third act, which is just the absolute best part of the film. I mean, the third act alone is what we have been building up everything for, and it absolutely paid off in every respect. They spend one section of that final act with just our 3 main superheroes on the Avengers team, Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, duking it out against a Thanos that is really, really scary. There's some people who have said that the Thanos in Infinity War is scary, but I really think that this Endgame Thanos in the final act was very, very scary. Because he was out for blood, he knew the threat that was at hand, and he knows that he has to stop these people, or else they are going to stop my mission. And so it's just really, really scary. Like, genuinely, I was on the edge of my seat watching Thanos in desperation, full armor. He's got the double-edged blade, and just them duking it out to death. And obviously, that scene where it is confirmed that Captain America is worthy has a really nice moment with Thanos before Thanos starts just demolishing his shield, which was obviously foreshadowed in Avengers Age of Ultron. So there's just so much callback. And when I was in the theater and I was watching this scene where Captain America was going up against Thanos, and Cap is kind of on his last breath. The shield's broken. He's down on the ground, and Thanos is kind of talking to him, and he's bringing in his army. I really thought, like, they had this outside shot, and I really thought that Captain America was going to have to take out um this whole army, and then because of how great that battle sequence was, you forget, like, hey, we reversed this whole thing. We snapped our fingers. Everybody is back now. And so when you hear T'Challa's voice in Captain America's earpiece, and you see the portals start opening, instantly you're like, this this is incredible. This is what we've been living up for. And you just see a bunch of other portals start just opening, huge portals opening. All of our characters that we've known and loved throughout the Avenger or throughout the MCU movies coming out to fight against the original threat in the MCU, which was that Chitauri army. And Captain America, after almost saying it several times throughout the franchise, finally says those amazing words. And right after that, I was just like, yes, let's get it. And it pays off so much in the end with Iron Man doing the ultimate, or being the one to have the ultimate sacrifice. And that scene where Doctor Strange is, holding up his finger, and he's like, one. And right then and there, like, yeah, he's gonna be the one that's gonna have to do it, and he does. He makes the ultimate sacrifice, and I just think it was sad, but it was the perfect way to close the arc of Tony Stark in the MCU. Just perfect way to do it. So, Avengers Endgame. Don't think it is as good as Avengers Infinity War or the first Avengers, but it still definitely paid off in every single way possible, and made watching every single movie in the MCU worth it for this ultimate build-up. And so, yeah, Avengers Endgame definitely goes at the awesome tier. We got Spider-Man Far From Home. I almost said No Way Home. It is going to go in the great tier below Homecoming. I didn't have as much fun with this movie as I did with Homecoming. And this is another one where I really think it gets too harsh of criticisms for one thing in particular, and I guess I'll just get it out of the way. Yes, is it kind of stupid that they set up the whole conflict because Tony Stark gave his glasses, these very powerful glasses, to a teenage kid that he really has not known for a long time. Yes, it's kind of stupid, but I had a lot of fun with it in this movie, and made for a lot of fun in the conflict of this movie. I think that the whole trickery behind the drones and Mysterio and all this kind of stuff was really cool. And throughout the movie, like, I was just doubting myself, like, this is actually happening. Like, every single thing, I was like, I'm just completely doubting myself. Like, I wasn't sure, especially on that final battle scene where Spider-Man finally shoots him, and kind of wins the whole mind game battle. And I was like, yes. But then it all ends on a big turn with Mysterio revealing his identity, and we get J. Jonah Jameson in the on the Times Square scene talking about it, in which I didn't know that they were going to introduce the whole multiverse stuff with the other Spider-Mans when they put on J. Jonah Jameson. I just thought, so does he actually exist in this universe, or are they actually bringing in the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans and all that kind of stuff? So I wasn't exactly sure, but it still did get me very excited. And I really liked the antagonist of Mysterio in this movie. I am not that familiar with the comics, so somebody who has read the comics probably saw it coming. But when Mysterio revealed that his whole superhero status was just all fake and fraudulent, and it was all done with all these drones and things like that, I was like, what the hell is going on? Because he's like in this back alley with all of these supporters with him, and they're giving each other cheers and everything, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I've never seen this in the MCU before, so I thought it was really interesting. It really got me. And so this was definitely the least predictable MCU movie that I've watched, if you watch it for the first time at least. And so it really just kept turning itself on its head and going in directions I just did not expect, especially in the final act when he reveals Spider-Man's identity, and obviously that's going to set up for the conflict in the final Spider-Man movie, maybe the final one, but the end to the three-part kind of Spider-Man. So yeah, I really had a lot of fun with Far From Home. Still has that really great high school humor in it. MJ is finally becoming a love interest for Spider-Man, so that's interesting as well. And so I really dig this MCU movie, and I'm gonna leave it at the great tier. Probably gonna be the bottom one at the great tier. Haven't decided yet, but yeah, I think it's definitely warranted to go up into the great tier, at least in my personal opinion, and that's probably just because I'm a little bit more generous with some of its flaws. Next up, we got Black Widow, and oh boy, this movie. We have reached Phase 4, by the way, so we're almost done. But yeah, this movie it's just in a very unfortunate position. I'm gonna put it in the meh tier, below Captain Marvel. It's just it's unfortunate because they waited so long, so unnecessarily long, to release this movie. There were so many different places where you could have done this movie. You could have done it, if they would have done Iron Man 2 differently somehow. You could have done it in Phase 1 before the Avengers. You could have done it after the Avengers, and we've, learned a little bit more about her character, going a little bit more depth. You could have done it before Infinity War, or maybe before Civil War, something like that. I know there were plans for that somewhere, but instead you decide to do it after she's already dead, and some people could really just care less. You could just read into the comics and you could just look at kind of her whole backstory and things like that, which they've already kind of looked into, especially with that flashback scene that she had when Wanda was kind of messing with her head in Avengers: Age of Ultron. You could kind of see the kind of horrible past she's been in. So is it nice to see her past? Kind of. I'm not really a fan of the family. Maybe it's just kind of how the writing is done, that the family is not supposed to feel like a family. They're all supposed to be different and have their unique personalities. But I just think it just looks really goofy. Like seeing Scarlett Johansson, these very effeminate characters, with somebody like Red Guardian, just feels really out of place. And it's one of those things where you're watching a movie that's kind of more, like, women power and all that kind of stuff. And in a lot of those movies, they have they usually have this one male character in this movie, and they just make him look like an absolute doofus, and I'm really just not a fan of that. So I personally did not enjoy Red Guardian that much. I hope they do him a little bit more justice in later MCU movies. But in Black Widow, didn't really enjoy his character. Didn't really enjoy the mom in this movie. I did, however, enjoy the sister. I think she's got a really fun personality. And obviously, it was a little disappointing because I knew that they were just gonna make a Hawkeye show. When they had the end credit scene, I was like, yeah, they're gonna probably make a Hawkeye show or something. So I'm probably never gonna see the conflict between her and Hawkeye. So a little unfortunate that I didn't really get anything out of this movie, other than just a little background information on Black Widow. So a little disappointing, especially if you haven't watched any of the shows. This movie really doesn't do anything for you. So yeah, the movie's in an unfortunate position. I've heard some people talk about the CGI in this movie. It didn't never really stuck out to me. But if you want to throw in that in there, I guess you can. That's something I forgot to mention with Black Panther. Black Panther especially, though, that definitely stuck out. But with Black Widow, not so much. But yeah, just there really wasn't a whole lot this movie had to offer, unless you were willing to watch the Hawkeye show. So other than introducing the sister who kind of replaces Black Widow, I guess takes her spot. So it's something, but yeah, it's in a really unfortunate spot because what are you gonna do with a movie when your main character has already died in the movie. Like, what are you supposed to do after that? So, yeah, Black Widow, it goes at the bottom tier. Next up, we got Shang-Chi, which I'm going to be generous. I'm going to put it at the bottom of the great tier because I think it is slightly above average in what it does. I think it offers a really solid origin story. There are a few things here and there that bring it down a little bit, but overall I had a lot of fun with it. As somebody who does martial arts myself, I really wish they had more martial arts kind of stuff in movies, modern day movies and stuff. Not shows. I know, many people have asked me, have you watched Cobra Kai or whatever? And it's like, no, no. I'm not really a huge show watcher, so I wish they would make more movies on it. But Shang-Chi does have a little bit of to offer at the beginning of the movie, but after that, then they kind of just go back to and trust their MCU special effects and CGI and everything like that, and it just kind of takes away from it. So it was really nice to get warmed up with it at the beginning of the movie, especially on that bus scene. But then they kind of fall back into their safe zone and just add in the CGI instead of the actual choreographed martial arts fight scenes. So I really wish they would do a little bit more of that. But otherwise, I really dug Shang-Chi. I think the dad, who is the antagonist in this movie, has a really interesting and complex arc. So that's really cool. I don't know about other people, but I thought the Mandarin was kind of funny in this movie. He didn't really take anything away from me. I also liked I believe she's like some popular social media influencer, who was kind of the friend of Shang-Chi in this movie. I liked her. Wong was kind of sprinkled in here in this movie. Same with Abomination. They kind of foreshadowed him being put into later MCU content, so that was kind of nice. Final battle sequence, not the best. The whole she perfectly shot the bow and arrow or whatever. I thought that was kind of stupid. They could have probably done something else. Like, we're just really supposed to expect that she's that good with her archery skills? Probably not. But overall, I really dug Shang-Chi. Had a lot of fun with it. I just wish they would have trusted their gut a little bit more with the choreographed martial arts fight sequences. And I think a lot more people would have respect for this movie and be more generous like me and actually put it in the great tier. But I really dug Shang-Chi. I'm leaving it up there. Next up, we got Eternals, which I am going to put in the meh tier, but I'm going to put it above Black Widow. At least it provides a little bit more than Black Widow, but it is still quite a letdown. I'm not familiar with the Eternals, so I was really hoping that they would give me a good movie that kind of helps explain the characters really well, which they do a little bit, but it doesn't help that they didn't get me interested in the characters. So when you don't get me interested in the characters, it's hard to kind of follow along like what they're all about and things like that. Obviously, it's been over a year now, so I've learned more and more about them. But yeah, it's Eternals. It's just a very sluggish, boring movie. I think it is a little bit too long. I think that this is one of the MCU movies that I think actually did need a show. I think they have made too many shows unnecessarily, for really no reason other than to just get people to subscribe to Disney Plus so that they can see some of it. But I think this is the one instance that I can think of right now where having a show actually would have helped them, and would have been needed. But instead, they tried to shove all of these Eternals into one movie and introduce them all, and it is just way too much. It's way too hard to create some character development when you have like over it's like 10 or 11 Eternals in this movie. It's way too much. And so maybe the longer runtime was kind of needed because they had so many characters, but the fact that I'm not interested in them it just doesn't really help. Like, Making the runtime longer is not going to help at all. You need a show for something like this. And I wasn't even really sure for like half the movie, like what the conflict was necessarily, who was the villain in this movie or whatever. But then it turns out one of the Eternals is going against them, so that was kind of interesting. But some of the Eternals are just absolute throwaways. Sprite, they make her very annoying, and I know she's supposed to be kind of childish, and you know, obviously she's not able to grow up, so she wishes she was able to do all this stuff that they have been able to do for thousands of years. But I don't know, they just kind of write her to be annoying, and I just think there are so many bad casting choices with Eternals. They chose some like popular actors for some of the Eternals, and they just do not fit the character at all. I don't know why they chose some of them. Um, it's really really bad. I really think they just casted some of the Eternals the way they did so that they would get more people to watch the movie. Because they're like, oh, look at that celebrity that I know that's on there, and it did not work. When you have somebody who's already been in several movies and you've known him for much better things than this movie, it makes it that much worse. So the casting could have been done better. The characters could have been done better if they would have made this into a show instead. There are a few good things about it. I think some of the Eternals were a little bit more taken care of better than others. But I'm not going to go through each individual one. This movie is just it. There was way too much that they had at hand to do, and it should have been made into a show. And the humor, I don't think I laughed one time in this movie. The humor just did not land, except for maybe that one scene where he's like, "What is this made out of? Vibranium?" in the trailer. But I mean, that was in the trailer, so when I watch the movie, I know it's coming. So it just doesn't really land after the fifth time you've heard it. So yeah, Eternals. It's just yeah, another unfortunate one, and I really kind of had low expectations too after watching the trailer and seeing some of the casting choices. I was like, yeah, I'm not really excited to have to watch this movie. So here we go, 2.5 hours. Gonna have to make it through. So Eternals, yep, it goes at that bottom tier. Next up, we got Spider-Man No Way Home, which I didn't expect to be as successful as it was. But I am not, I would be a fool if I told you that I was not excited for this movie when I saw the trailers. They released them very late, so I think that was the great thing. Like, oh shoot, this movie's coming out in December. Like, let's get it. I can't wait till December. I can't wait to watch this movie. And it definitely paid off. As somebody who grew up watching the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans and the Amazing Spider-Mans, this movie was an absolute joy, a treasure, a fan service. Not to me, but to everybody who loved the other Spider-Mans from the other universes. So yeah, I'm gonna drop Spider-Man No Way Home in that awesome tier above Iron Man. Not to take anything away from Iron Man, but um, Spider-Man, especially namely the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, was one of the first superhero movies I watched, and so I grew up on it. I watched it, many times as a kid, 1, 2, and 3, and so I really, really enjoyed these characters being reintroduced. Like, some people were saying, well, are they actually going to be in the movie, or is it just going to be the villains? And I was like, yeah, I mean, it would be kind of stupid if you brought in, Doc Ock and Green Goblin, all these other people, and not bring in the other two Spider-Mans and create all these memes and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just a service to the meme culture. It just had so many great, funny moments that were kind of callbacks and even how do you want to say it? We're even like the three Spider-Mans pointing at each other. Everybody knows that meme as well. So this movie knew what it was doing. It knew its audience that it was trying to appeal to and serve, and it did it well. And actually had the other two Spider-Mans play an important role in this movie. There were so many other movies that came out in 2021 that brought back like legacy characters from certain franchises. Scream, Ghostbusters. There are a few others that I can't remember. Halloween Kills. And they brought back the legacy characters. It was nice, but they didn't really play much of a role in this movie. But in Spider-Man No Way Home, they played a role that I really wasn't expecting. Not only did they add to the humor quite a bit, the memes, everything like that, but they helped develop the Spider-Man character in this MCU so well. In a way that I really wasn't expecting. It was an unexpected treat, honestly. Um, and this movie finally kind of redeemed the problems that I had with Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, with him being too reliant on Tony Stark. And maybe that was just the plan all along or something like that. But this movie just does a really great job. It almost feels like it took on the burden of doing all of the character development for Tom Holland, because he goes from this kid who is scared of everybody forgetting who he, or scared of everybody knowing who he is, at the beginning of the movie, and just wanting everything his way, and just wanting everything to go back to normal, and just want, and it just shows his immaturity, especially in that scene where he's telling Doctor Strange, "Oh, but not this person. Oh, but not this person. But not this person." And yes, is it kind of stupid? A little bit, that Doctor Strange was just kind of set up in this movie so that all this conflict could happen and everything. Again, another kind of cheap setup like with Far From Home. And they basically had to mega nerf Doctor Strange in this movie so that they could make it all work. But in the end, it all pays off for something that I think nobody would say no to. I think everybody wants to see all three Spider-Mans on screen, swinging throughout the city and fighting against all these Spider-Man villains that we have known throughout the years. Some of them were done better than others, obviously. The three main ones that they focused on were Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and surprisingly Electro. And the other three were kind of forgotten about a little bit, but it was still nice to see all of them in here. And just, again, a very unexpected treat to see the massive character development that we got in this movie. From really just him going from this immature boy to this grown man who's like, I need to kind of rely on myself. I need to become more independent. And they really did make that Aunt May death scene very emotional. And again, did not really see that coming. It's hard to redo a line like "with great power comes great responsibility," but I think they did it as best as they could. It's certainly not going to have as much ground and how do you want to say it, leverage as when in the original Spider-Man, but still they managed to make it very emotional. And again, they finally kind of filled in some of those holes and problems that I had with the previous Spider-Man movies in the MCU, with not being a huge fan of Aunt May and the character of Spider-Man, not having too much development and being too Iron Man-like. But in this movie, we got Spider-Man. And the other two Spider-Mans gave him advice on mistakes that they made in their past, and they played such a great role and added so much to this movie. And Spider-Man No Way Home is just the one word to describe it is an absolute treasure, a treat, whatever you want to say. And so Spider-Man No Way Home, absolutely dug it. Up we got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. There are some very conflicting opinions on this movie. Some people were quite underwhelmed, and some people were quite satisfied. For me, I was satisfied. I'm gonna put it in the great tier. Probably above Avengers Age of Ultron. I'm gonna put it right there. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I will admit, I had my expectations a little bit too high for this movie. I was like, there's a ton of different cameos that they could make for this movie, and what if they introduce this character, this character, this character? And so, did it get was I a little underwhelmed because my expectations were high? Yes, but I think, thinking about it for several months now. I think this movie wasn't. The sole purpose of this movie was not just to be a cameo city. It was supposed to be about it was supposed to be about Doctor Strange and the multiverse and all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't just meant to show all these different characters that we haven't been introduced to yet that are from these different universes and things like that. And so, yes, it gives its brief moment with, cameos of characters that they're like, stay tuned because we're going to have shows and movies for these characters. Obviously, X-Men, which is just a whole big thing within itself, Fantastic Four, obviously showing some of the what if characters. So that was all really cool. But what I liked a lot more was um, what I was not expecting. Because what I wanted to come to this movie for, admittedly, was cameos. I was really excited for that. But ultimately, I enjoyed other elements of this movie a lot better. I really like how Sam Raimi was the one to direct this movie, and I really wish they would have let him go all out and just made this movie rated R. Like, I'd really just wish they'd make some MCU movies rated R so that certain directors just could go all out. Because that middle section of the movie, like the middle portion of the movie, where Wanda is just slaughtering all these like multiverse characters, like I don't give a shit. You're getting killed, and just seeing all this blood and carnage. It's just like you're not used to seeing it in the MCU, and it is just Evil Dead Sam Raimi crap, and it is really, really awesome to see. Not Spider-Man Raimi, Evil Dead Raimi, and it is really cool to see. Additionally, again, they bring back some of that really cool cinematography in this movie. The one standout scene especially is when Doctor Strange is going against that evil Strange, Supreme Strange, whatever you want to say, and you got Supreme Strange with his purple mystic art color, stuff, and he's going against him. And you got these musical notes getting thrown at him and everything, and stuff going in slow mo. It's just really cool. It was like watching some Matrix stuff, and it was really really cool to see. And yeah, again, like, could we have had more multiverse fun? Could we've had more? Maybe, maybe they could have just made it into a show so that they could do even more. But I still really dug Multiverse of Madness. I think they could have done the character of America Chavez a little bit better. Maybe they'll redeem themselves a little bit in the future. It seems like um, they are just kind of getting started with her character. At the ending of the movie, you can see her like learning how to do the mystic arts and things like that. Um, but as far as her role in this movie, she really was just kind of this plot device, and she wasn't that interesting in my opinion. I really liked Doctor Strange and his love interest in this movie. Again, freaking forget her name because I forget all the names in these movies. But I really liked that in this movie. And Wong, again, playing another good role. I really liked the final battle sequence, where Doctor Strange he has to basically reincarnate his dead self to go after Wanda and defeat her, and it just seems like they're using every last breath to stop her, which I think is really cool. And even though I didn't watch WandaVision, I still got a kick out of this movie. I still understood it pretty well. I knew, I kind of knew briefly like what was going on in WandaVision, so it wasn't a big surprise to me, and it seemed like they were kind of veering towards her being the villain. I was like, either they're gonna make Wanda the villain or they're gonna have like Evil Strange, because they had that in the trailers, they had that scene where they shown him. I forget his line that he said, but I really wish they would have done Evil Strange. I think that would have been really badass. But Wanda, I'll take her going evil and berserk. Very interesting, especially when you got Professor X staring at her and trying to get control of her mind first, and this screen goes white, into this blank void, white void, and you're like, who got who first? And then you see Professor X in the kind of dream sequence or whatever you want to say, and then you see Scarlet Witch come out and just twist his head. That was so awesome. I love Professor X. I know they'll do more with him, but that was so interesting to see two characters that are that have similar powers go against each other. I thought that was really really cool. So yeah, there were a lot of things that I loved about Multiverse of Madness. A lot of great standout scenes. Little underwhelming. Could there have been more? Yes, but I'm not going to spend years thinking, why could they have done this or this and this or this? Because there were still so many great elements of this movie. So, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it's going in the great tier. Next up, we got Thor, Love, and Thunder. Well, if I put it in the meh tier, I would be saying it's worse than Thor the Dark World, which I don't think. So I'm going to put it below the Incredible Hulk, but above Thor the Dark World. Yeah, I discussed this not too long ago, but I'll say it again if you didn't hear me. Not a big fan of the humor. I think Taika Waititi went a little too far in this movie compared to Thor Ragnarok, where it was a little more controlled than Thor Ragnarok. But in this movie, he just every chance to put in a joke, he threw it in there, and it was just none of them, like almost none of them, just landed for me. So yeah, not a big fan of the humor. That's like the kind of the main talk about, which is really weird. Like you wouldn't expect the main criticism of a movie to be having too much humor, but it really does bring it down in this movie. And I still fail to kind of see what the purpose of Thor: Love and Thunder was. Why did we need a fourth Thor movie exactly? Because number one, Jane Foster, like, completely forgot about her after Thor: The Dark World. So some people are saying they really enjoyed, Jane Foster's role in this movie, and I was like, why did we forget about her this long, only to bring her back now? Really strange. I don't think they did her bad, but it's like it's been forever, and it's like, why now? Why are we bringing her back this late into it? It's just very extremely awkward. The villain in this movie, Gore, does a good job, but is definitely out of place in this movie. So it's unfortunate that they kind of just wasted a really good villain on a movie that is just a complete joke the whole time. There's still some enjoyment to be had out of it. Some people who just love a ton of humor, they'd get an absolute kick out of this movie. So when this movie is not making a joke every 5 minutes, which is like almost no point in this movie, it's good. But when it's just throwing endless jokes at you over and over again, it's just very hard to enjoy. Additionally, they throw away Guardians of the Galaxy at the beginning, like the whole Guardians of the Galaxy plot at the beginning of the movie, which is what I was kind of excited for in this movie. I knew they were gonna add Jane Foster, and obviously that was in the trailer, Lady Thor. But I was like, are they also gonna do him teaming up with Guardians of the Galaxy that they kind of hinted at the ending of Endgame? And no, they just completely throw it away in the first 15 minutes. He's like, screw you guys, I'm going off my own. I don't want to be with you guys right now. It just completely thrown away in the first 15 minutes. I'm like, that would have been an amazing plot there. I guess they're making Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, so maybe Thor will be in there somewhere, but otherwise, yeah, Thor: Love and Thunder, I still fail to kind of see the purpose of this movie. I think if they wanted to have Thor again in the MCU and, play some type of role, I just think they should have just thrown him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which they might still do, and that would have worked for me. But Lady Thor, not really a huge fan, and I'm pretty sure didn't she get killed in this movie as well? So you bring back a forgotten character for one movie only for her to be killed off. Just didn't really work for me. So yeah, Thor: Love and Thunder, mediocre. Next up, you got or I guess I shouldn't say next up. Last but not least, we finally made it to the latest MCU movie, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I'm gonna put this above. I'm gonna put it in the good slash average tier. I know that I gave this movie a pretty good score, but I'm gonna put it in the good slash average tier, above Captain America: The First Avenger. I did enjoy it more than the first Black Panther. It fixed some of the uh, issues that I had with the first Black Panther with the CGI and a few other things. Um, and otherwise, I dug the movie. I dug the villain or villains in this movie. It was kind of more of a like a tribal conflict, really. So I liked that. Still not really sure about Shuri kind of being the replacement for T'Challa. I still think, me personally, that they maybe could have found a replacement actor instead, or just not have gone in that direction at all. I understand they did it for something towards the ending of the movie. But I don't think it was. I don't know. Me personally, I don't think it was really needed because she didn't really become the Black Panther until like the last 15-20 minutes of the movie to set up the final battle scene or sequence. So I don't think it was really needed. But this movie does a really good job paying respects to Chadwick Boseman. Obviously, I've already discussed that. Spends plenty of time doing that. And again, kind of like with Avengers Endgame, showing where everybody's at after this. Um, and yeah, I just think Black Panther is a big improvement from the first Black Panther, in my opinion, because I had a lot of criticisms for that movie with believing that it is quite overrated. I think this movie got me into the characters a little bit more since I wasn't paying that much of attention when I watched the first Black Panther for the first time. So it got me into some of the characters that are specifically related to Black Panther a little bit more. Specifically M'Baku, the Queen, Shuri, the character that's played by Danu Gari or whatever. Um, got me into all those characters a little bit more. Even Ironheart. Like, I wasn't even sure about Ironheart because I knew she would be in this movie somewhere. But I think she played a decent job in the movie, and sets up for the show pretty well. So I think all the characters did a really solid job. And I know there was wasn't there one other thing I was gonna say. Also, I really like the humor too, which surprised me as well. So yeah, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever goes in the good slash average here. Right, so that is it for the MCU tier list. Let me know what your top 5 MCU movies are or whatever. This is my MCU tier list. I'm really curious to see where you guys put your MCU movies at. So let me know. Otherwise, I know it was a bit of a long one. I know I went a little bit longer than on my last one. I think my last one was like a little over an hour long. This one's probably going to be like over 2 hours long. So I apologize for that if you're not a big fan of them, but I will put in timestamps for each individual MCU movie, in case you just kind of want to skip around and look at them. So otherwise, stay tuned for the future content. Like I said, some Walking Dead content coming and some more basically movie reviews for the rest of the year, and then the 2022 movies I saw tier list, which I'm very excited to do, and tell you my opinion on all of the movies that I didn't talk about to you guys that I have watched over 2022. So really excited to do that. Otherwise, stay tuned for the future content, and like and subscribe, guys, and I will see you next time.